Hello my friends and welcome back to Chess with Konstantin. In today's episode of Games by Legendary Chess Masters, we are going to teach you, my viewers, how to play the 4 knights opening like a boss, with either side, white or black. To assist us with this, we have legendary international master Rashid Nezhmetdinov playing with the black pieces. And with the white pieces, we have his master level opponent, Kosolapov. This game that we will use as an illustration was played in Kazan in 1936, shortly before World War II. Now I will note that I will show you some very common opening lines in the 4 knights game in the first part of the video, and it will take some time. So if you're not interested in opening theory and want to skip straight to queen sacrifices, then feel free to skip ahead. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and let's jump right into the action. So this game began with e4 and e5, the king's pawn opening. And then, as the name implies, all 4 knights got into the game. So we have knight to f3, knight to c6, knight to c3, and knight to f6. Before we move on further in this game, I would like to show you some common variations. So first of all, if you happen to be black in this position and your opponent decides to play bishop to c4, trying to transpose to the Italian game, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. You can immediately think to yourself, I am at least equal here and possibly I'm going to win this game. The reason being is that actually move bishop to c4 in this position is substantially worse as if white played Italian game right away, which is knight to f3 and then bishop to c4. And it is also worse than the last video we looked at, which is the Vienna game, Frankenstein, Dracula, and other kinds of variations with knight to c3 and then bishop to c4. The reason being that now, if you are black in this position, you can simply capture this central pawn. It is not a pawn sacrifice, because if white captures the knight here, with knight takes knight, then black immediately plays pawn to d5. And pretty much no matter what is played, for example, if bishop d3 captures and captures, then after bishop to d6, defending this pawn, then black will get ready to castle and play f5, and black will be better here. So actually black has the advantage in this variation. If, on the other hand, white fails to capture this knight right away, but plays something adventurous like bishop takes f7 check, then again you have absolutely nothing to worry about. As the black player, you simply capture on f7, and after knight takes knight, you play d5, and actually black is almost winning here. The king is quite safe on f7. King will retreat back to g8 at some point. Black has control of the center already, and really nothing to worry about. Black has also a very active bishop pair, so you can only dream of your opponent doing this. This is just an easy win for black. So please don't worry if bishop to c4 happens here. Now, the more common line is, again, if you watched the last couple of videos, is to play bishop to b5 here. This indirectly doesn't pin the piece, but it puts indirect pressure on the black's king, develops the piece, and prepares castling. Now, you can, as black, decide whether you want to try to push for a win or if you would like a draw. So first, let's say that your opponent is much stronger than you, and in this position you feel like you want to try to draw the game. Well, what do? You play knight to d4 here. This is called the Rubinstein variation. And the idea is that after knight captures on d4 and e captures on d4, then e5 takes on c3, takes on f6, queen takes f6. Here, after capturing on d3, queen e5 check, it's a simple draw because you exchange queens, and castle, castle, the position is, after both sides castle, the position is going to be completely equal. You can see the queens are off the board. You have two bishops versus two bishops. I mean, this is just an easy draw. If you feel like you want to try to win the game, then after this move, you play bishop to b4 instead. And this is how that would go. So castle, castle, pawn to d3. And you don't have to memorize these, by the way. You just have to remember the ideas or the themes of the opening. But this is very important. So after d3, you don't want to continue copying the moves as black, but you do want to capture this knight. And only after takes, then you can play d6. And in this position, you play queen e7 to protect this pawn. And after this, the idea is to play knight to d8. And the idea is in the next couple of moves, you will push h6, forcing decision regarding this bishop. If he can retreat, then maybe you will play like bishop g4. And the idea is that eventually you're going to maybe trade off this bishop, put the knight on e6, and then close the position with pawn to c5. So you will have two knights, and your opponent will have two bishops, but the position will be closed. You'll have actively placed knights, and these pawns, or double pawns on the queen side, will present a target. Actually, black has very good winning chances in that position. So this is just for your reference. Bishop b5 here as white is much better than bishop c4, and if bishop b5, then you can go for a draw with knight to d4, or you can try to win with bishop to b4, but remember to capture this knight. Those are the themes you need to remember. But in the actual game, rather than playing these active moves with bishop to c4 or bishop to b5, white decided to be passive, played pawn to d3. You never want to be passive when you're playing white. You never want to just concede the center to your opponent, and you don't want to run behind in development. So the move d3 cannot be recommended. It's already a mistake on move 4. And black responded, of course, with the most active response, pawn to d5. This is an excellent move, because now if white captures on d5, black will recapture with the knight, and then black will occupy the center. Okay, already on move 5. So this would be fantastic for black, and the better responses would be to play like bishop to e2 or bishop to d2, and you don't want to concede this center with the exchange. And if black takes the pawn, then you just recapture, and things are symmetrical and still fine. But Mr. Kosolapov did not subscribe to this channel and didn't realize that was a mistake, so he took on d5. And now we have a knight takes d5. Already, as I said, black can be considered to be slightly better due to his occupation of 2 of the 4 central squares. Then we have move bishop to e2 for white. Bishop b4, pinning this knight. Very logical move. Bishop d2, developing the bishop and removing the pin. Black castles. And now white plays a very silly move, knight to e4. And black retreats the bishop to e7. Now, I would know that both players here have been a little bit unconventional. Both white and black have violated what's considered to be one of the most fundamental principles of opening strategy, which is not moving the same piece twice during the opening phase of the game. But there are very important key differences between white's silly move to e4 and black's move to e7. So first, let's look at white's move to e4. Here the knight, yes, it is in the center, but it's quite vulnerable to pawn pushes. For example, pawn to f5 will kick this knight immediately, and it will have to come back to g3 or c3. At the same time, black's move is only a temporary repositioning of the bishop that actually can support these pawn advances, the attack with the pawns, quite well. And in the future, this bishop can even move to f6 with the idea to stop white from advancing pawn to d4. So actually, while black repositioned the piece and it's perfectly acceptable, white's move is going to result in some lost tempi, which means black will gain the initiative after these pawn pushes to f5. So let's take a look at what happened. Now we have a castle from white, and of course black pounces on white's knight by playing pawn to f5. Knight to g3. I would note that it was much better to play here knight to c3. Knight to g3 is a mistake because the knight can become a target in the future. You're going to lose even more tempi as the white player. But knight to g3 was played. And now black decides I'm going to go all out in the attack and plays pawn to g5. It's not a pawn sacrifice. There are two pieces protecting this g-pawn. And normally you don't want to weaken your king side by pushing pawns like this. But if you look at white's pieces, they're quite awkwardly placed. So there are no attacks right away that are forthcoming against black's king. So it's not only fine to play g5 here, but actually it's quite dangerous, because after moves like, g4, you can imagine black's pieces getting repositioned here, and really there could be a strong mating attack, which ensues shortly. So here white played the move knight to e1. This is a preventative move. It has certain functions. First of all, after black pushed the g4, white would have had to do that anyway. So in some ways it prevents being taken by surprise. Also, maybe white is eventually hoping to reposition the knight to c2, for example, pawn to c3, knight c2, and then finally pushing d4 and trying to finally contest black's center that white gave up on move 5. But it's a question, will white have time for that? So after knight to e1, black played knight to f4, not with the idea of capturing the bishop or exchanging anything, but simply with the idea of activating the knight and placing it on an active square. Here we have a mistake from white by playing pawn to f3, and maybe trying to contest these squares. Now I want you to very seriously think about this, and if you remember nothing else from this game, remember this one thing. Never, I repeat, never unnecessarily weaken your pawns on the king side when your opponent is attacking. So by pushing this pawn, it's actually creating a weakness in the pawn structure. And it's going to end badly, as you will see. So here, Nezhmetdinov responded with bishop c5, check. And of course, king h1 was played, removing out the check. But notice now where the king is and how vulnerable this open file looks. So now we have rook to f6. And the idea is to play rook h6 and really mate this king. So then we have pawn to c3 finally being played by white to try to contest the center. And here Nezhmetdinov unfortunately made a mistake, as he pointed out. In the game he played bishop to e6. But actually rook h6 right away, continuing with this plan without delay, is much stronger. Nezhmetdinov in the game was afraid of this move, queen to b3 check. But now actually, after blocking the check with bishop e6 and queen takes b7, you can go ahead and play g4 right away. And actually it doesn't matter what white does here. He's going to either get mated or lose material. So it looks like this knight is free, but he cannot be taken. For example, if white takes on c6, then you just give him a rook to go with the knight. You should say rook takes h2 check. Here have my free rook. You cannot retreat here because this is controlled by the bishop, so you have to capture the rook. And now queen h4 will be checkmate. So taking this is impossible. Actually, the best move here is queen takes a8 to prevent the queen from moving away. But then you're just down in exchange, rook for queen. So this is not a serious game anymore. This would just be a slaughter. And so remember that after moves like rook f6, if you do make a rook lift move with this idea, speed does matter, and even waiting one move sometimes reduces the effectiveness of this maneuver. So let's continue. After pawn to c3, actually bishop to e6 was played instead of this winning move. And now we have the move, finally, knight to c2, preparing d4. And only now did Nezhmetdinov play rook to h6 one move later. However, now we have white has had time to develop the knight here, and now he has the option to defend with bishop to e3. So this is an important move because now this sacrifice is no longer sound, because the king can run away to g1. It's no longer covered by the bishop. So the game continued with pawn to g4, continuing the attack. And I would note this sacrifices the bishop. So black's bishop is now hanging, and white pounces on it, capturing the bishop. So now white is a whole piece up. But can he survive the ensuing attack? Queen to h4. Notice this threatens checkmate right away. Comes back with the bishop to g1. There could have been some alternatives here. For example, if king g1, then this is very, very, very bad, obviously, because queen captures, and then you just take the piece. So there's really no, not only do you take the piece, you actually get a material advantage with two more pawns. So I don't want to say that bishop g1 was forced, but it was certainly the best, probably the best defensive move. But white is still up a piece, so it's not that easy, right? Well, because the king is pinned, queen can simply recapture this piece. This queen takes g3. So this is impossible because of this pin. So now the material is back. And black still has the attack. So this wasn't a real sacrifice, but merely a temporary setback. So knight to e1 was played. I would note here that actually knight to e3 is much stronger. But unfortunately, a rule of thumb for you guys: if you are moving the knight, 95% of the time, a knight is happier towards the center of the board, simply because the knight happens to control more squares in the center than on the edge. And every time you want to move a knight to the edge, I want you to think twice and say, will the same function be served if I move it not on the edge, but somewhere closer to the center? Something else to note here is if white tried to defend with rook to f2, then we have this sacrifice right away, and then simply recapturing the rook. So white is actually a pawn, black is actually a pawn up here. And in fact, black could even simply play knight to h5 here, just adding insult to injury. And capturing this queen is impossible because then you run into double checkmate. The check is from the knight and also from the rook. And this is what's called a double mate. So rook f2 doesn't work. So knight to e1 was played to try to defend these squares. And here, bishop to d5 activates the bishop to a very strong square and continues the attack. I mean, you could see white's pieces are quite passive. The queen is not doing anything. The knight is passively defending these two squares. The bishop is terrible. The rook is terrible, may as well not exist. And in contrast, look at how good black's pieces are. We have a very active bishop. We have a very active knight. The queen is right there, ready to deliver mates. We have a rook on a key rank, looking at the white's king. And the other rook, I would note, is ready to be lifted as well, in case you feel like doubling up the rooks on the h file. So there's no question that however close material may be, that black is just crushing white in this position. Here, on move 20, white played pawn to b4, maybe trying to chase this knight. I'm not really sure what was the point, but you know, white's pieces are almost all of them are paralyzed, so there is really not much to do here in white's defense. And here you can pause the video and see if you can find it. There's actually a quite spectacular sacrifice in this position. So go ahead and take a few seconds. I'll give you time. So if you found it, congratulations. The move here is queen takes h2 check, sacrificing the queen right away. And after bishop captures and g3 check, I mean g3, threatening capturing the bishop. King g1, moving out of that pin, and rook takes h2. It looks like black is down a queen, but actually there is no defense to this rook being lifted from e8 to e6 and to h6. I mean, white can try to play something like d4, but there is no way to stop either a mate or just a crushing defeat. I mean, the best white can try to do is try to sacrifice the queen on f4, and that will delay the mate for a couple moves. So this is the idea, and then the idea is simply to push and create a mate because of this pawn right here. So this was the sacrifice. But in the game it happened a little bit differently. Nezhmetdinov first played knight to h5, insulting his opponent a little bit. So as we've seen earlier, pawn takes queen is impossible because of the double checkmate. And so bishop f2 was played, attacking the queen. Queen f4, f takes g4, and now queen takes h2 check, sacrificing the queen. And after king takes h2, then we have knight to g3 check. The opponent should have resigned here, since moving back results in this checkmate with the rook. But Kosolapov decided to go ahead and capture the knight. And now we have a very insulting checkmate with the pawn to f4 checkmate. A beautiful game that really demonstrates the essence of how to play the four knights game like a boss, especially with the black pieces. I hope you saw some very useful tactical themes here. I hope you also saw the importance of positioning your pieces on active squares. I mean, if you compare these bishops and the knight on the white side to black's earlier development, there's simply no comparison. And remember, it's always better to be active than passive. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time when we delve into yet more exciting games by Mr. Nezhmetdinov. Thank you very much, and if you liked the video, don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons. Konstantin out.